Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the South Holland series, a district of Lincolnshire that contains 22 of them, centred around the town of Spalding. There's some good ones out here, so let's dive in. Welcome back to the South Holland district of Lincolnshire, people. Now, I'm beginning this one on a riverbank, and behind me you can see a bridge. And that's the first landmark that we're going to talk about here. It's a very important landmark over this river. And that bridge is partially within this place's name. Welcome to Sutton Bridge. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. This is Sutton Bridge, which was known in ancient times as Cross Keys Marsh. It's about 13 miles east of Spalding and 8 miles north of Wisbech. A familiar river runs through this one, the River Nene, which flows past the village on its northward journey to the Wash. Sutton Bridge is one of the largest parishes in South Holland, and its area includes the hamlet of Guy's Head, located close to the Wash. Sutton Bridge has only been in existence in its current form since the early 19th century. In the 18th century, it was a collection of farms and cottages, but it began to grow thanks to Thomas Guy, a shrewd part-time banker, printer, and stationer. In 1825, an Act of Parliament saw the beginning of the modern village. It was long a place where wagons and carriages were guided across the Wash, sometimes with the loss of cargo or lives. The Act allowed the Nene to be dredged and straightened. Historically, it was bendy, and it wound its way to the Wash through Cross Keys Marsh. A large embankment was built along its course, and a bridge, a marvel of engineering at the time, was built to allow passage to Norfolk. It was completed in 1831, and soon a number of wharfs and warehouses were built along the riverbanks. This one's got quite the storied past, so let's go for a walk and learn about it all. Our walk starts on the eastern bank of the River Nene, and we might as well get the village's biggest landmark out of the way first. This is Cross Keys Bridge. It's a swing bridge, and it's still very much operational. It was built in 1897 at a cost of £80,000, and it's the third bridge to cross the river at this point. The first bridge, built in 1831 as part of the Wash embankment works, was made of timber and cast iron and opened in pretty much the same way as Tower Bridge in London does. However, it was eventually found to be awkwardly sited, and in 1850 that's when the second bridge was opened. Again, it was a swing bridge, and it was used only for road traffic until 1864. That's when the Midland Railway came along. This, the third and current bridge, originally carried a railway line as well as a road. These days it's purely road traffic. Here's a plaque which tells us who built it. Because it's made of iron, it's no surprise it has links to the West Midlands. Now, the majority of Sutton Bridge is on the Lincolnshire side as opposed to on the Norfolk side. I know both sides are Lincolnshire, technically speaking, but that's how I'll refer to it, just for ease, really, of saying which side's which. So now we're on the Lincolnshire side. We can go and see some other landmarks here in this place. We're going to head up this road to start with, towards the old wharf. This is the former Bridge Hotel on West Bank. Since 2015, this has been slated for demolition, but it still stands. We're heading past this to the site of an old dock. Sutton Bridge had many small riverside wharves for years. They handled timber, coal and corn. However, since navigation on the Nene was difficult to Wisbech, which was an inland port, Sutton Bridge was intended to become its replacement. Substantial funds were raised for a new dock, but in 1881 it literally collapsed. Only one ship, the SS Garland, ever entered it, and it left just in time. Efforts to save the dock were futile, and the plan was abandoned. The modern Port Sutton Bridge opened in 1987. It's a 62-acre dry cargo port and warehouse complex with a wharf that can accommodate between 4 and 5 vessels. The original failed dock is now part of Sutton Bridge Golf Course. Moving away from the riverbank, here's some allotments for the fans. It's quite a quiet, peaceful part of Sutton Bridge these days. I imagine it wouldn't have been in years past. Now, I'm going to mention at this point that there is a golf course close to this area. It's to the north of where I'm standing now. If you look where the camera is pointing, obviously it's on the other side of those industrial buildings over there. But to get to it, you have to go round. I think you have to go that way. I'm not totally sure where the entrance is. It's not on our route, but we see plenty of golf courses anyway, so we're not really missing out on much there. What we are going to do is we're going to head for the main street now, so we're going to go this way, turn right at the end, and see what else Sutton Bridge has for its residents these days. Most of Sutton Bridge's amenities are laid out along one straight road. This is Bridge Road, and kicking us off we have the Co-op, seen here on the right. Bridge Road is the former route of the A17, so at one time this was the road traffic used to travel through the village. It makes sense then that there are plenty of shops, because they would have benefited from passing trade. These days the A17 bypasses the village, and we'll see exactly where in a while. Sutton Bridge is large enough to sustain most basic amenities like a shop and a post office, as well as things like hairdressers and food outlets. This little building is the Sutton Bridge Constitutional Club. It was built in 1928 for a conservative women's organisation. Part of its land has recently been sold off. On the opposite side of the road there's Bridge Hardware, a family-run shop that's been a familiar village landmark for over 60 years. Now, with the exception of the hardware shop you've just seen, I've purposely left the other side of the road for the way back because the church is on that side, and there's also something called the Curlew Centre as well, so they will be for later. Our next job is to head up New Road. This next area of the village is greatly residential. Off New Road there's a series of terrace streets which gradually fade into a larger area of post-war properties. After the collapse of the dock, you'd probably have expected Sutton Bridge as a village to have gone into decline. That wasn't the case. It was virtually unchanged for around 40 years, probably thanks to the surviving small quays on the riverside and the warehouses which were still used for corn, coal and timber. In Kelly's Directory of 1913, Sutton Bridge was still described as being chiefly one street, Bridge Road, with a short street or two diverging from it. From here on Princes Street you can use a short footpath to access St Matthew's Drive. This is a much more recent area of housing. It's a retirement home complex and it was built in 1978. There are 63 bungalows here, all of which only accept residents over the age of 60. Blimey, the allotment fans are well in today. You've already had one set already, and here there's another set at the top of this road. Amazing. 2 sets of allotments. The fans will be going nuts, I promise you. And these are fairly big as well. Okay, let's move away from these now and head now down again back to the main road. Now this is going to be the hardest part of this walk. This one involves the school and a few other bits and bobs on the main street, and we're heading all the way up to a pub. So here's the school, Westmere Primary. This is the only school in Sutton Bridge, which is surprising given its size. This was built in the 1980s to replace an old school, which we'll come to further around this route. You can access the school off Allenby's Chase, and here on the corner of that road there used to be a primitive Methodist chapel. Around the corner and back to Bridge Road, the amenities continue. Here's the local village pharmacy. Next door there's a chippy, but you won't get any chips here. In December 2022, owner Martin Baxter hung up his apron after 55 years, and now Baxter's fish shop is closed. Luckily, the same can't be said for the Premier store just beyond it though, or for the two pubs at this end of the village. We're heading for the Anchor, and on the way we pass the Greyhound, a small pub with wood panelled walls and low ceilings. There were more pubs along this road in years gone by. Okay, we've arrived at the other pub. This is the Anchor. There's a long walk up there to this. Pretty much when you get beyond this pub, the road then runs off into Little Sutton, so there's not much beyond this. A long walk up here, and on the other side of the road there's also a farm shop. Let's turn you around, you'll see Sutton Farm Shop. I'll get a little bit closer because I'm a ways away here, and I'll cross the road too so you can see what it looks like. You don't realise how far it is up here until you actually do this, until you actually walk up here. It's a long old way, and of course it's a dead straight road, not really much to see on it apart from the odd landmark which I've captured. There we go, there's Sutton Farm Shop, looking very resplendent in the sunshine. Fantastic. Now to get back we don't have to walk all the way down this road. I'm going to take a right turn which will take us towards an old railway line. After a walk along Falklands Road, we come to a small 3-acre wildlife area called Tom's Wood. It's named after a man called Tom who planted all of its trees. This part of Sutton Bridge is a lot newer than what we've seen so far. A lot of it was built on former railway land, although you'd do well to find a railway here now. That's because the A17 follows the route of the old line. The line in question was the Spalding branch of the Midland and Great Northern Railway. It crossed the Nene via Cross Keys Bridge. One side of the bridge carried the road and the other side the railway. And yes, Sutton Bridge once had a railway station too, but it was closed in 1959. Handily, walking between the two sides of the A17 here is pretty easy, thanks to this subway which connects Railway Lane South to Railway Lane North. After walking up here for a short time, we pass this little industrial estate on the right. And next to that little industrial estate there's a medical centre which you can see behind me right here. I better be quick because I know there's a car coming out so I better move before they try and run me over. I'm stood at the entrance. Okay, we're going back up to the main road now and taking a right turn and going straight back towards the bridge. Back to Bridge Road, and these new houses stand on the site of a now lost pub. It was called the Peacock Inn, and so these are Peacock Court. Over the road we've got the old school. This was a public elementary school, and it was built in 1878 under the direction of the Long Sutton School Board. It could hold up to 450 children, but since the 1980s it's been disused. In front of it there's another landmark, an awesome little milestone. This building interested me. It's a kebab house now, but it used to be a United Free Methodist chapel. Next we have the Curlew Centre. This is effectively the village hall, and since 2022 it's had a brand new attraction, Sutton Bridge Cinema, the brainchild of local man Melvin Philpott. The centre is the community hub, and around the back there's a large playing field and a playground. There's something for everyone here. And in much the same way as Little Sutton, here in Sutton Bridge, there's a card going on the notice board right outside the parish council office. Best place for it. There we go. That's 2 down now in South Holland. We've got one more major thing to go to on this walk, and that of course is the church, which is just a few paces that way.
Anything that looks, yeah, anything like possibility. We're going there to feed Joe's cat.
St Matthew's Church stands prominently alongside Bridge Road. It was built in the 19th century and was consecrated in August 1843. Standing tall in the churchyard we have Sutton Bridge's War Memorial. In total, this bears the names of 48 men who were lost in the 2 World Wars. St Matthew's is a unique church. It's the only one in Lincolnshire that's made of flint stone. It's built in the early English style and consists of a chancel, a nave, north and south aisles, and a tower at its western end. Its foundation stone was laid in July 1841 by Benjamin Harrison. He was the treasurer of Guy's Hospital. Amongst its best features is its east window, which depicts the Epiphany, the Crucifixion, and the Ascension. It also has something called the Blue Window too, which is to the memory of all who left Sutton Bridge to work abroad between the years of 1840 and 2000. So we are back over the bridge, and that is the main walk around Sutton Bridge completed. However, there are 2 more things that I want to highlight in this episode. The first of which is the former RAF Sutton Bridge, which is on the Norfolk side of the River Nene. And here we have a memorial to the RAF base, which as you can see is right next to the bridge. Now the base itself was down there, occupied this sort of area of land just to the southeast of the bridge. Now I can't access any of it because it's all private, so guess what? That's going to be today's special section. In 1926, on farmland bordering Sutton Bridge, an RAF practice camp was established. This would eventually become RAF Sutton Bridge. In 1939, at the beginning of World War II, RAF Squadron No. 266, a fighter squadron, was reformed here. They initially operated the Fairey Battle light bomber aircraft, but in 1940 they would become only the 2nd Spitfire squadron in the RAF. Sutton Bridge played a crucial role in the war. In 1943, Cross Keys Bridge was used by 617 Squadron from RAF Scampton to practice the low-level flying needed for the legendary Dambusters raid. At the time, electric cables crossed the River Nene just before the bridge itself, and to hone their skills, they would practice flying Lancaster bombers underneath them. RAF Sutton Bridge closed in 1958 and its site transferred to the Ministry of Agriculture. Today, only small remnants of the airbase remain. Next to the former airbase is one of this part of the country's biggest landmarks. Right on the border between Lincolnshire and Norfolk is Sutton Bridge Power Station. On clear days with its bright red lights, it can be easily seen as far away as Hunstanton. However, it's no longer in operation. In 2020, the plant, which had 2 turbines powered by natural gas, was mothballed. It was built by Enron in 1999 and cost some £337 million. By September of the same year, it had been put up for sale thanks to the plummeting cost of electricity. In 2000, the plant was bought by London Electricity, a division of EDF Energy. In 2008, EDF sold the plant to the Macquarie Group, who in 2015 spun out the power plant, owning part of the business as Kalon Energy. It employed 68 people and supplied 2% of all power in England and Wales. Now though, it's in a safe and dormant state. So if you drive from the bridge up the eastern bank, you'll go for a good couple of miles. It's a dead straight road alongside the River Nene, and you'll come to not just one but two lighthouses, one on either side of the river. There's one of them over there, and the other one is just out of shot to your right here. However, there is a path just here, so we will be able to see both of them. This is our last part of Sutton Bridge. On opposite banks of the Nene are two almost identical lighthouses. They were built in 1831 to commemorate the opening of the Nene Outfall Cut. The towers are circular, but the top lantern sections are hexagonal. Both have a circular window and a half-moon window, the latter of which is in a different location depending on which light you're talking about. Now, even though the Nene has no rocks to protect ships from, the lights were important. They were used to guide ships through sandbanks in the Wash and into the river if a high tide occurred after dark. For that reason, they weren't always lit throughout the night. This one on the eastern bank is known as the Sir Peter Scott Lighthouse. That's because before World War II, it was inhabited by Sir Peter Scott, who has a street named after him in the village. He's often described as the father of conservation and is one of the founders of the World Wildlife Fund. I've been waiting for a long time to cover somewhere that joins the Wash, because I've wanted to say this for a long time. If you're very familiar with Lincolnshire, you may know that there's a radio station here in this county called Links FM, and they do a few jingles obviously during the day on their usual programming. One of them says "From the Humber to the Wash," and now the channel has indeed gone from the Humber to the Wash. We've seen both now on the channel, well, almost, because obviously I can't get all the way to the Wash, but you can see it in the very far distance over there, so at least, you know, I've come within touching distance of it, I suppose. So yeah, that's been the parish of Sutton Bridge, and there's plenty more to come in South Holland. I'll be back at some point in the future, but for now I'm heading over the border into Norfolk to start another series. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this one, a bit of a lengthy one. Lots here in Sutton Bridge, isn't there? Plenty of history, lots to get your teeth into, and two magnificent lighthouses on either side of the River Nene to finish it all off. You cannot tell me, can you, that Lincolnshire is not a beautiful part of the country. I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot. This has been the parish of Sutton Bridge, and I'm out.